The film begins on a stormy night, in 1957, in the Silesia lowlands. At that time Pastor Popiluzko ran in a hurry, bringing the baby into the church. The tiny baby is thought to be the incarnation of a demon child who carries the seeds of evil in his heart. Father Popiluzko opened the package containing the dagger ready to be thrust into the baby's body. The scar on the tiny baby's left chest seemed as a sign of the existence of the devil in his heart. From outside the church, the police rushed to ambush and immediately shot the priest who was caught holding a sharp weapon. Popiluzko died instantly, while the baby demon was rescued by the police. At that very moment, evil had enveloped the earth, until the lunar eclipse appeared reddish in color. And, the film begins. 30 years later, a priest named Marek gets off a bus to go to an ancient church in a remote area. Marek's arrival was immediately greeted warmly by the abbot, Pastor Andras. They walked to the examination room of the church administrator, Brother Doid, while explaining the situation in the sanatorium. It is known that the priests who live there are trained to be able to perform exorcisms and heal people with demonic disorders. Arriving at the examination room, Doid immediately gave Marek's robes and checked their contents. When they found cigarettes in the suitcase, they immediately confiscated them because they were not allowed in the convent. After going through a series of checks, Marek was ushered into the restroom. Pastor Andras confirmed that electricity and telephones were not available at the convent. In addition, the priests were forbidden to leave the room when it was getting dark. Before leaving, Andras again explained that demon sightings often occurred in his monastery. Marek didn't really care about Andras' explanation and said that he came to the sanatorium church with a good reason. After Andras left, Marek rushed to change clothes. On Marek's left chest, there is a scratch mark that looks exactly like the baby demon at the beginning of the film. Apparently, Marek was a baby who was rescued by the police and was assigned to investigate the sanatorium church. At the bottom of Marek's suitcase, there was a hidden room that was used to store investigative tools. Marek opens a newspaper article reporting on the mysterious disappearance of several women. From rumors circulating, 8 missing women had experienced a trance and were taken to a church sanatorium. In the afternoon, Marek gathered at the long dining table with the other priests. The food served on the table was a suspicious piece of meat with a deep red sauce. Marek was unable to swallow the food dish. He tried his best to keep swallowing it and hurried out of the dining room. Marek walked back to the room while surveying the surroundings of the monastery. Even though it was still bright, the conditions inside the monastery were always dark, especially when it was only lit by torches. Marek stopped to see a female patient being fed by the priest. Marek rushed to take a shower in his room to calm his mind. In the dark days, the priests gathered to carry out the exorcism process. The woman who had been forced to eat lunch earlier was taken to a room and tied to a bed. The priests stood in their respective positions. A priest brought a camera to capture the exorcism at night. After everything was ready, the door to the room was closed tightly and the ritual began. While sprinkling holy water, the pastor recited a prayer that made the woman convulse. Pastor Andras read a verse in the holy book again, while the woman's condition was getting worse. After going through a long process, it was time for Pastor Andras to thrust the cross towards the woman. Instantly the cross in Andras' hand burned by itself. Marek was stunned to see the mystical incident that he had never imagined before. The painting on the wall of the exorcism room was dripping black liquid from wide-eyed eyes. After the exorcism was over, Marek returned to his room to wash his face and continued to walk around the monastery. Marek had stopped in front of the abbot's door to sneak in. Unfortunately, Doyd catches Merk and says that the priest is forbidden to enter the room unless the abbot calls him. Merk hurried off to have dinner together. The meal of meat did not enter Merk's stomach at all, and he had to throw up many times in the room. In fact, Merk's molars fell out after 2 meals of meat. In the late night, Merk managed to sneak into the abbot's room to continue his investigation. Merk used the door lock pry tool he had prepared beforehand. Merk had seen a video of the exorcism carried out by Pastor Andres this afternoon. Merk rushed to the exorcism room and checked the condition under the patient's bed. The man found a used syringe that was allegedly used to stun the rebellious patients. Surprisingly, beside the bed there is a button that can be used to shake the mattress when the button is stepped on. Merk also finds a statue of an exorcism cross which turns out to have a button to fire like a match. The exorcism tools in the church sanatorium are more like magic tools. Merk increasingly suspects that there is an evil game under the guise of a sacred religion. In the morning, Pastor Pyatt asked Merk to lead a confession in front of the other priests. Merk rushed up to the podium and read out a statement of repentance in Polish. Reverend Pyatt forces Merk to use Latin, which, as it turns out, Merk can't do. Pyatt begins to suspect Merk's true identity. Merk's clergy was even more questioned. Pastor Pyatt was forced to replace Merk to lead the statement of repentance in Latin. After having breakfast together, Merk rushes into his room and burns the news article to eliminate the evidence of his undercover. Merk noticed the conditions outside the church where several priests were burying the woman's body. Merk rushed to the women's room to check. It turned out that there was a pool of fresh blood on the floor of the room. Finding Merk there, Pastor Pyatt asked Merk to come to the church and enter the confessional. It seemed that all along, Pyatt had been aware of Merk's suspicious movements. He explained that all acts of disobedience in the monastery would be punished with brutal punishment. Pyatt claimed to have tried to escape from the monastery, but there was no way out. He asked Merk to be more careful in his behavior and not to look for ways to escape. Feeling pressed, Merk finally reveals who he really is. It turns out, Merk is a member of police intelligence assigned to investigate the monastery in the ancient church. Merk explained the case of the disappearance of 8 women who entered the monastery and their bodies were never found again. After the death of Father Papilazgo, the police admitted that it was difficult to approach the church. They were forced to send intelligence personnel to carry out covert investigations. Merk asked Pyatt to tell him the truth. After seeing the footage of the exorcism process, Merk was sure that all the rituals were just a hoax. Pyatt acknowledged all this and said that the abbot was the mastermind behind the exorcism tricks. The abbot was forced to do so in order to get funding from the Curia and the Vatican. As long as someone is possessed, the funds will continue to flow to the monastery. The abbot has evidence of when the patients went mad and died in an exorcism ritual. Merk believes that the female patient who died had been forced to take dangerous drugs before. Pyatt said that the woman who was last healed had died, and her body was buried in the churchyard. After receiving valuable information from Pyatt, Merk rushed back into the room to check the strangeness of the place. Merk even moved the wardrobe that was attached to the wall of his room. Sure enough, he found a hole in the wall that was surrounded by a disgusting black liquid. Merk put his hand into the hole in the wall and found the demon eyeball. He immediately threw the cursed object away after his eyeballs moved by themselves. The demon eye object is a magical CCTV that can know all of Merk's behavior in the room. Merk instantly spit out jet black blood from his mouth after touching the demon's eyes. The man became paralyzed and scared himself to the point of crushing the demon eyeball with his own foot. That evening, Maer came out of the convent into the churchyard to look for the woman's grave. He dug up the tomb and opened the coffin. Unexpectedly, the woman's body was not in the coffin. From behind, Doid covered Maer's head with a cloth and kept him in the room. The convent keeper managed to find tools hidden inside Maer's rosary, a gun and a flashlight. Maer had to be tied to his bedroom bed because his guise had been discovered by the church. Not long after, Pastor Andres came in with food, assisted by Doid, forcing Maer to swallow the suspicious piece of meat. Every time Maer was about to vomit the food, Doid would hit Maer's stomach and force him to swallow. That night, Maer tried to escape when Doid was fast asleep in his chair. Maer hastily untied his leg straps, causing Doid to wake up. They got into a fierce fight, until Maer was forced to shoot the head of the abbey's guard. Maer covered his shot with a pillow to keep the gunshots from echoing. Using his flashlight, Maer went into the kitchen to check what meat was served to the priests. In a large frying pan, there was an abundant piece of meat complete with human teeth in it. Maer rushed to open the food storage room, and it turned out. It was filled with the body of a woman who had been cut into pieces. Priest Piet approached Maer pretending to be surprised to see the human body in the food storage room. Before Maer shoots Piet, the pastor invites Maer to go to the church library. There, Piet shows an ancient book that explains who Maer really is. Piet shows a picture of a baby demon in which a red lunar eclipse marks the birth of the Chosen One. In the book it is stated, the newborn demon baby must be killed immediately because otherwise the Chosen One will eat 7 sinners and drink pure blood. The Chosen One will turn into a demon until the world ends. Piet confirms that Maer is the chosen baby demon. Maer flatly rejects Piet's opinion while saying that he is a policeman, not a baby demon like in ancient fairy tales. Piet tries to convince Maer that the priests at the monastery want to sacrifice Maer's body to raise the devil. Piet invites Maer to run through a hidden underground passage. Maer is still suspicious and doesn't believe Piet's words. The young priest took off his robes where the scars of the lashes appeared all over his body. He tried to convince Maer that Piet was on the right side. Since the tunnel led out of the building, Maer and Piet immediately went through the long, dark dungeon. After walking for some time, suddenly, 2 people in red robes beat Maer until he fainted. It turns out that Piet is on the side of the heretic priest and traps Maer into going with him. Maer's body was tied tightly and crucified. Meanwhile Andres and the other priests gathered around Maer in red cloaks. Andres explains that they have been stalking Maer's whereabouts for a long time, the Chosen One, the baby demon. The deviant church bribed the state apparatus to give Maer an investigative task and enter the monastery. Andres whispered that demons are not evil creatures but humans are barbarians and deserve to be punished. In the underground passage, there is a well which is the gateway to hell or hellhole. The monastery was deliberately built above a well for 800 years. The members of those heretical sects had waited a long time for the grand ritual of demon awakening. After the ritual is over, the devil will enter Maer's body and a new order will rule the world under the devil's command. The priests were promised to become new apostles under the auspices of the devil. Before the ritual begins, a woman who is accused of being possessed is deliberately brought in to be a pure blood sacrifice. Immediately, the woman's hair was pulled back and her neck was parted for pure blood to flow freely. The priests began to taste the fresh blood meal sip after sip. While casting a spell, Andres poured pure blood into Maer's mouth. The demon summoning prayer was shouted loudly while Maer felt pain all over his body. Because the devil never came, Andres felt something was wrong with their ritual. Piet reopened the book and said that it only contained records from 800 years ago. Frustrated by the fruitless ritual, Piet asked his colleagues to return to their respective rooms. Fearing that the police might ambush their convent, Piet is forced to draw a knife into Merck's stomach until the man is dead. Merck's body is thrown into the well and the ritual is over. After a few hours passed, Andras seemed to relax in his office while enjoying cigarettes and liquor. He didn't even notice that the crosses all over the church walls turned and flipped over by themselves. Andras actually drunk heavily, dancing alone in his room while listening to the radio. Not long after, Piet came to lay Andras on the bed. The old man still doesn't accept it because he hasn't succeeded in becoming the devil's apostle. As deputy abbot, Reverend Piet seemed remorseful for the failure of that evening's ritual. Andras fell asleep with a state of severe disappointment and heartbreak. Surprisingly, Piet smothered the abbot's face with a pillow to death. In the morning, the priests were very busy collecting the remains of the human bodies of the 7 sacrifices that were kept in the monastery kitchen. They burned all the bodies to destroy the evidence. Piet began to make a play. He gathered all the priests to the abbot's room and claimed to find Andras's lifeless body. Reverend Antoni, as an elder at the monastery, said that Piet is now officially abbot, replacing Andras. At the same time, Merck, who was lifeless at the bottom of the well, was able to rise again after a fly from Andras' nose entered his nose. Merck, who was trying to get up, felt unbearable pain until his body changed shape. After receiving the highest throne as abbot, Piet presided over the funeral procession of Pastor Andras in the church. In the funeral procession, Piet's body suddenly flew into the air and just disappeared. Insects began to scatter out from behind the altar table. The devil's hand, sticking out with his long fingernails, walked out of his chest. The priests who saw the demon were very frightened and ran frantically to save themselves. The demon with supernatural powers silenced the priests until they could no longer move. Even the statue of the cross of Jesus can move like a living creature in general. The horned demon made the cross upside down from the bodies of his cult priests. Not only the priest, the patients in the monastery also fell over to form an upside-down cross. Miraculously, the Dajjal demon grew flowers to bloom beautifully in the middle of the snowy winter. The old tree that had died in front of the church also flowered and bore fruit. The devil is preparing to end the world, and bring a great apocalypse to the entire universe. The sky began to split open until the earth was scattered, and the film ended.